Beyond a valley, near a mountain that was covered in the most gorgeous wildflowers, there lived a girl named Ella. Her mother worked as a seamstress in a nearby village, creating beautiful clothing by hand. Ella would stay home and make thread from cotton for her mother to use in her work. She would carefully process it and dye it a variety of colors, from blue to gray, to the brightest reds, and to the sunniest yellows. Ella especially loved this task and made a game of finding rainbows in the threads she spun. She was a creative child by nature, and the villagers would flock to her home to buy the delicate threads she made. Every day, while her mother was at work in the neighboring village, Ella would walk to a small field a few miles from home, where she would pick the cotton she needed to make her thread. She liked to choose the very best clumps herself, and could always imagine what each fluffy ball would become. This routine suited them both just fine. They were happy and content, and wanted for nothing. One such day, Ella was returning home from the field, carrying her little basket of cotton in her hand. All of a sudden, her ears were filled with the most melodious sound she'd ever heard. It rang through the air like a magical chime. She was overcome with joy at the enchanting way it filled her senses. She knew she had to find the source of this strange and beautiful tune. Perhaps once she found it, she'd sit down and listen for a long, long time. Ella turned in the direction of the music. Its lilting quality made her think of ripples on the surface of a lake. She began to walk, and as she did, she could sense the melody growing clearer and more beautiful. A picture of a lake filled her mind and seemed to call to her. She must be going the right way, she realized. The sun was shining in the blue sky, and there was a gentle breeze, which made her walk even more satisfying. Here and there, she saw little rabbits hopping through the grass. Butterflies danced between the blooms that dotted the landscape. Even though Ella was curious about where the music was coming from, she was grateful for such a wonderfully relaxing journey. The rows of flowers in their many colors gave her ideas for the spools of thread she would spin later. She thought it would be nice to make some pink ones, like the roses, and some yellows, like the daisies. She might dye some of the cotton as blue as the sky, or purple for the lavender that scented the breeze. shallow puddles, grasping her little basket of cotton, giggling as she went. Most of the time, Ella was a calm and practical person. She never did things like this. Perhaps that was why she was drawn to this song. It gave her a sense of freedom to go where it led. But now, a new sound intermingled with the enchanting song. She could hear the quiet lapping of water in a lake. The sound was mesmerizing, and became even more so the closer she got to it. She could feel it lulling her into a sense of calm. Before she even saw it, she knew she would love to curl up next to the lake, in the soft green grass, listening to the beautiful chorus of sounds. When Ella reached the edge of the water, she realized the lake was much bigger than she'd imagined, and so blue it dazzled her. The water was crystal clear. It seemed like something out of a picture book. She couldn't stop looking at it. She was so entranced. Near the surface, she could see little orange and red fish swimming around. Some moved more slowly, while others darted this way and that. Ella wanted to take a closer look. She stepped toward the edge of the lake, and then stumbled, tipping her basket. A big, round ball of cotton flew out and away over the water. She watched it linger in the air above the lake for a few seconds before falling in, slowly succumbing to the weight of the water and sinking into the depths. Ella was heartbroken. It had taken her what seemed like ages to pick it in the field. She needed to make thread for her mother's work, and now she'd lost the perfect bundle, trying to follow a song of all things. She shouldn't have been so careless, Ella thought to herself. She knelt beside the lake to see if maybe she could reach it. But she couldn't even see it anymore. It had drifted too deep. She looked and looked, but soon realized it was hopeless. A single tear rolled down her cheek and fell into the lake with a plop. The moment her tear touched the surface, something wondrous happened. Magnificent ripples formed in the place her tear had fallen. The water around it began to splash. Small whirlpools swirled and danced nearby. Ella forgot all about the song that brought her to this magical place. face as she tried to understand what was happening in front of her. She wiped her face and stared as hard as she could into the lake. As she watched, the water began to glow with a faint blue light. Slowly, one of the whirlpools in the center of the lake grew bigger and deeper, and out of it rose the most beautiful woman Ella had ever seen. She glowed as the lake did, with a soft blue aura, and her hair was golden and floated behind her, as if she was suspended in water and not air. Her face was serene, with a hint of a smile. Her robe was white and flowed like her hair. She had to be a goddess, Ella thought. No human or earthly creature could possibly look like that. As Ella considered whether she was dreaming, the woman beckoned, raising a long arm gracefully towards her and smiling wide. Ella dared not move. She was scared the woman would disappear. But then the woman spoke. It sounded like the fabled voices of mermaids, or the tinkling of wind chimes. In a voice just louder than a whisper, she said, "Come, my child. You need not be afraid. Great glories await you under this lake I call home, as do many other creatures who would be your friend, should you so choose." Ella was sure this was the woman who'd been singing. She knew she had to follow her. At the same time, Ella knew she should be on her way home, and she told the woman as much. The woman reassured her. There was no need to worry. The lake was a world where time stood still, and Ella could see all she wanted in the depths without a second passing by on the surface. Ella trusted her, though she couldn't understand why. Carefully, she dipped one toe in the lake. The water felt comforting, and she was compelled to put her other foot forward. As she did, she felt the glow of the lake envelop her, like a fine blue mist, filling her every pore and rejuvenating her. She'd had a tiring day, first in the field, and then on her walk here, and the mist seemed to refresh her in a gentle sort of way, like the first rain after a hot summer, or a warm, comforting bowl of her favorite soup. She closed her eyes and let her arms hang loosely by her sides, relishing in this meditative feeling. Then, like the woman, Ella felt herself rising off the ground, starting her descent into the lake. The water was clear and warm. On it, she floated to the woman, who took Ella's hand gently. Ella felt a sense of calm wash over her instantly at the woman's touch. All her worries slipped away from her mind. She forgot about losing her precious cotton and the daily journeys she made to get it in the first place. She forgot about everything but the sensation of this moment, and she wanted to capture it in her mind forever. She felt relief about where she was, and optimism about what the next minute would bring. The woman began to move deeper into the lake, taking Ella with her. They didn't even have to swim, Ella noticed in awe. They still seemed to be floating, carried along on gentle waves of the comforting water. They passed multicolored fields of coral, swaying in the current, which reminded Ella of all her colorful threads that everyone loved so much. The coral was everywhere, covering all the rocks and ground, and forming a little forest of its own. Playing hide and seek among it were the most varied fish Ella had ever seen. Big and small, colorful and plain, some with long flowing fins, and others with short, cute ones that almost looked like tiny arms. There were some that moved lazily, either because of their size or because they just weren't in a rush to get anywhere. Ella couldn't quite tell. And there were others that slipped in and out of crevices and grass and seemed to have an electric quickness about them. Ella took in the view, trying to commit it to memory, while still unsure if this was a dream. She wasn't sure where they were going, but the woman seemed to have a destination in mind. After floating for a while longer, they reached a structure that Ella could only think of as a palace. It seemed to be made of strange yet beautiful rocks, and it glowed with the same blue color that the woman and the lake had before. It was off-white with colorful turrets here and there, and it seemed to go on and on in various directions, haphazardly, like all the different parts had been built as afterthoughts. There were large gardens in front of the palatial building, full of plants Ella couldn't identify, but she was sure they only existed in the depths of this lake. They had huge flowers, and their colors seemed even more vivid because they were surrounded by the crystal clear blue water. Ella wanted to stop and examine them more closely, but the woman seemed excited to take her inside and show her something. She beckoned to Ella to follow again with renewed energy. Ella was curious as well, so she followed the woman through an entryway, only to find that the inside of the building was just as beautiful as the outside. It was decorated with stained glass, and there were more plants everywhere. But unlike the garden, these plants were growing out of the building itself. There were no flower pots to be seen. The plants emerged out of little corners and crevices in the walls, and swayed softly with the water's current. Together, Ella and the woman floated to a massive hole in the center of the building, where Ella saw a huge throne at the top of a high staircase. Upon the throne sat a woman just as beautiful as the one who had brought her here. She wore long, flowing robes of purple, lined with gold, the kind fit for royalty, which she clearly was. Ella imagined she was a queen. The queen's hair was stark white and neatly piled into a braid on top of her head. Her eyes were the kindest Ella had ever seen. Surrounding her were various creatures, human-like and otherwise, some of which Ella could not name. There were also animals normally found underwater, like seahorses and fish. They seemed to Ella to be a council of sorts, and they all chatted to one another about her arrival. The Queen welcomed Ella to their community and told her that they sought to help everyone, both above and below the surface of the lake. They felt Ella's tears land in their water and didn't want her to be sad any longer. The Queen told Ella they had some humble offerings to give her. She gestured to the woman who'd brought Ella to them to lead her to a treasure room nearby. Then she told Ella to pick as much as she wanted of any one kind of thing from the room. Ella followed the woman into a room full of treasures beyond her wildest dreams. From wall to wall, it was stacked with the most precious things in all the world. She could barely fathom where to stop looking. Ella was touched by the Queen's kind offer. It was so generous, she didn't know what to say. She told the woman she didn't need much. She was happy with what little she and her mother had. Looking around, she saw precious stones, ornate metal pieces, artwork, artifacts, pottery, the finest silks, and many, many other things. Perhaps she could take a couple of the stones, Ella thought, as a memento of this special day. The Queen's collection was awe-inspiring. Although there were countless treasures here, they'd all been stacked and neatly organized, each in their own special place. One side of the room held chests that seemed to be brimming with precious metals, like gold, silver, and platinum. Next to that were baskets full of beautiful stones in a staggering variety of colors: rubies, emeralds, diamonds, sapphires, and some Ella didn't recognize. They shined invitingly, waiting to tempt anyone who saw them into picking them up and whisking them away from here. In another corner, a rainbow of the finest silks fluttered loosely in the water, and yet seemed unharmed by it. These called to Ella in particular, as in all the work she'd done making cotton threads. She'd often fantasized about running her fingers over luxurious silk cloths. With a tentative hand, she reached out and touched one of them, and she thought it was quite possibly the softest thing she had ever felt. It rustled against her hand in a way she'd always imagined that silk would. It was almost like touching butter, with a beautiful softness that comforted her. Glancing around the room, Ella saw that one corner was piled high with all sorts of ancient artifacts. They looked as though they must have great value, even to her inexperienced eye. Up on top of the farthest shelf, something small and white caught her attention. She floated closer and realized it was her ball of cotton, the very same one that had started this amazing journey to this magical place. Ella turned to the woman and told her that she'd made her decision and would like to talk to the Queen again. Back in the throne room, Ella thanked the Queen for the opportunity to choose from her magnificent haul of treasures. She admitted that it was a difficult decision, but Ella knew she couldn't possibly take anything but the cotton. Given that it was her livelihood, she thought it best to take the thing she'd come for. Ella told the Queen that she didn't want to take something she hadn't earned either. Say the cotton was all that she needed. Everyone present was surprised, from the fish to the seahorses to the Queen herself. Surely Ella must be joking. Who would go into a room like that and choose a little ball of cotton over the priceless items on display? The queen asked her again if she was absolutely sure, and Ella said yes. She told them that the wonderful experience she'd had with them here was more precious to her than any of the things in that room. As she said this, Ella felt the water around her begin to swell and envelop her with its warmth. She felt the current rocking her gently and lulling her to sleep. She couldn't resist its pull, so she spread her arms wide and drifted off with it. She couldn't say later that she remembered the journey back home. As she was carried by the current, Ella dreamt of the silks she had seen. She felt the touch of the soft material in her hands. She remembered how the precious stones had glittered and glowed, like the warmth of a cozy fireplace. She awoke when she reached the comforts of her own bed. Blinking her eyes open, she saw not only her familiar surroundings, but drapes of the finest fabrics and piles of gems in every corner of her room. Gifts from the people of the lake. And there, resting lightly on top of them all, sat the little ball of cotton. Ella smiled and snuggled deeper into her bed. With a happy sigh, she closed her eyes and floated away on blue currents to dreams of a magical palace hidden under the surface of a deep blue lake.